On today's episode, we will be going into the unique history of some of the most amazing looking vessels ever to serve on the Great Lakes. Those vessels would be that of the whaleback ships. Let's begin. Now, before we can talk about the whaleback ships themselves, we do need to talk about their creator, that of Alexander McDougall. Born on March 15th of 1845, Alexander McDougall was a Scottish-born American seaman. He would be the eldest son of Dugald and Ellen McDougall. Alexander and his family would emigrate to the Canadian Scots settlement of Nottawa, Ontario. When Alexander was 17 years old, he would actually ship out onto the Great Lakes shipping industry and begin working. This would become a prime inspiration for pursuing his hobby of designing steel ships. Captain McDougall would go on to build his very first whaleback barge on his property in Duluth. McDougall's conceived idea of the whaleback was so that it could withstand the very worst weather storms that the Great Lakes could throw at these vessels. The whalebacks were primarily constructed out of steel. In total, 44 of these whalebacks would be constructed from 1887 to 1898. 33 would be built at West Superior, Wisconsin, 2 at Brooklyn, New York, 1 at Everett, Washington, and 1 at Sunderland, England. 21 of these whalebacks would be steamers, and 23 to possibly 25 would be tow barges. One of them would be the magnificent passenger steamer, the Christopher Columbus. The Christopher Columbus was the only whaleback ship ever to be built for passengers on the Great Lakes. The Columbus would be launched on December 3rd of 1892. She would have a gross tonnage of 1,511 tons. She had a length of 362 feet, a beam of 42 feet, and a depth of 24. For propulsion, she would have 6 boilers which would power 2 triple expansion steam engines within her, and she could reach speeds of up to 17 knots. She could also carry a maximum capacity of over 5,000 passengers aboard her. She is also said to have carried more passengers during her career than any other vessel on the Great Lakes. The Columbus's career would last over 4 decades, and then she would be retired during the Great Depression and unfortunately scrapped in 1936 by the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company at Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Electrical lighting was used within her, and she had gorgeous furnishings as well. The Columbus would also have a grand saloon and a skylighted promenade deck, which would contain several fountains along with a large aquarium which was filled with trout and other fish of the Great Lakes. The cabins and public spaces as well were also fitted out with oak paneling. They would have velvet carpets and etched glass windows as well. The furniture itself within the Columbus was nothing to bat an eye at as well. They would be leather furniture, and marble shops along with restaurants were also provided for passengers within the Christopher Columbus. The Columbus would come with 4 decks, and again an estimated carrying capacity of around 4,000 to 5,000 passengers aboard her. However, some sources state that she carried 7,000 passengers on her maiden voyage. Whether or not that's true, that is incredible. Even though the Columbus was an incredible success, unfortunately Captain McDougall's whaleback designs would never truly catch on. And by 1900, the last whalebacks had been built in Superior. Now, whaleback ships and barges could carry typically 3,000 to 3,500 tons of bulk cargo aboard them. Cargo such as iron ore, grain, coal, and even sand would be carried on them. Some of the larger designed whalebacks, like the Alexander McDougall ship herself, could even carry up to 6,800 tons aboard her. It's also worth noting here that the Alexander McDougall ship would be the last and longest vessel of her type. She would also have a traditional bow on her as well, and ditching the non-spoon-shaped bow like the rest of the other whalebacks had. She would have a straight stern and a raised forecastle. She would also have a quadruple expansion engine within her. Now, it's also worth bringing to mention here this hybrid design ship, or semi-whalebacks. While they shared similar designs as the traditional whalebacks designed by Alexander McDougall, they were not exactly the same. The Choctaw, for instance, was the only one of 3 semi-whaleback ships ever built. She also had an identical sister ship named the Andaste, or Andaste. Also, apart from the traditional whaleback design, these semi-whalebacks would have traditional bows on the front of them. However, these semi-whalebacks and traditional whalebacks all seem to have the same weakness in common, especially out on the lakes when storms would erupt. They were very vulnerable to being swamped and overloaded and sunk. Now, some unfortunate negatives or drawbacks to the whaleback ship designs would be the hatch covers. These hatch covers aboard the ships would often warp or bend with repeated use. This would result with the watertight seal often breaking and allowing water to rush in or leak. Another downside to the whaleback design would be their low profiles in the water. True, their designs were to allow waves to wash over them. However, this would also make them harder to see while out on the water. Other vessels would often not see them in time and collide with the whalebacks. This would result in many of the whaleback ships themselves sinking because of collisions. There was also a limited cargo capacity as well aboard them. The curved deck provided minimal working spaces for the crews and limited cargo capacity as well along with this. When a whaleback ship was fully loaded, it would actually sit very low in the water. Again, this design was designed to allow waves to wash over the deck without damaging the hull structures, but more often than not, water would find its way within the hull of the ship, especially during storms out on the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, several whaleback ships and barges would end up sinking in the Great Lakes, which brings us to the next section of our video. It wouldn't be right without mentioning some of these very unfortunate and tragic losses of the whaleback steamships and barges on the Great Lakes. Again, many of them would be lost because of storms and collisions. Now I will mention a few of these very unfortunate losses. The SS Clifton would be lost on September 21st or 22nd in 1924 in a terrible storm on Lake Huron. The Clifton was likely overwhelmed by the wind and waves of this gale, which would ultimately sink her along with her 28 crew members aboard her. The Thomas Wilson whaleback ship would sink on June 7th of 1902, this being after a terrible collision with the wooden steamer George Hadley. This was just outside of the Duluth shipping canal in Lake Superior. 9 crew members would unfortunately lose their lives in this accident. The James B. Colgate would sink on October 20th of 1916. This during the infamous Black Friday storm out on Lake Erie. The Colgate was likely overwhelmed by the wind and waves and the massive waves that would cause her to take on excessive amounts of water. The only survivor from the James B. Colgate would be Captain Walter Grashaw. However, the 19 other crew members aboard her would tragically lose their lives. And finally, the Sagamore whaleback barge would tragically sink on July 29th of 1901. This accident would occur as the Sagamore was rammed by the steel steamer Northern Queen. There was heavy fog in Whitefish Bay on Lake Superior at the time of the collision. This accident would result in the tragic deaths of the captain and 2 other crew members aboard the Sagamore barge. Now, on a more positive note, however, not every single whaleback ship that sank on the Great Lakes would result in the loss of life. Many of the whalebacks that would end up sinking on the Great Lakes would result in the crews and their captains being rescued, thankfully. And lastly here, we have to talk about the very last surviving whaleback ship on the Great Lakes, that of the SS Meteor. Originally named the Frank Rockefeller and launched in 1896, the Meteor would actually have 3 names. Her original name, the Frank Rockefeller from 1896 to 1927. Her second name, the South Park from 1927 to 1942. And then her final name, the Meteor, from 1942 to 1969. The Meteor was built in Superior, Wisconsin, again by Captain Alexander McDougall, and she would be the last remaining vessel of her kind. She operated on the Great Lakes until 1969, and then she would become a museum ship on Baker's Island in Superior, Wisconsin. The SS Meteor operated on the Great Lakes for an impressive 70 years, transporting iron ore, oil, and grain across them. And now, to bring this video to a close, the whaleback ships have come and gone on the Great Lakes. They would end up serving over 80 years on them. I thank you everyone for joining me on today's episode on this short introduction to the history of the whaleback ships on the Great Lakes. This is by no means an exhaustive account of their entire history or services and different variations. It's also not even the full details on Captain Alexander McDougall. There's actually quite a lot of his life that I left out for the sake of time. Again, I would encourage you guys to enjoy this video, please, by all means, but also do your own research. If this interests you and you learned a lot or even learned some new things, I always learn new things with every video I make. Dig deeper into the history of the whalebacks actually being the precursors to the turret cape ships or the turret ships. There's a lot of history that Alexander McDougall had that led to him being a captain of his life as he served on the Great Lakes, and kind of like I touched earlier, his limited schooling to say that he had before coming and serving, and then that passion would lead to him designing these ships. There's a lot of history that is very much worth looking at and discovering about him. And then not every whaleback ship that sank, like I said, would lose crew members aboard them, and not everyone would sink on the Great Lakes. I believe some were scrapped and whatnot, but there's individual stories of these harrowing accounts for the ones that were lost and did unfortunately lose crew members. I've covered a lot of them on the channel, and I'm sure I'll revisit sometime in the future. Maybe a couple of them, not all of them. But for now, I do hope this video has intrigued you and excited you on this subject. This is, just think of this as a good introductory history to them. There is plenty more to learn about whaleback ships and maritime history when it comes to the Great Lakes. So yes, please do enjoy this video, but as always, I recommend you guys dig a little deeper and find out that there's quite a lot more chatter to say to be learned and discovered about these magnificent vessels. By all means, I'll let you guys in on a little secret. We are planning a visit, hopefully soon in the future, here to the SS Meteor. I'm hoping that everything can fall into place and that can happen, and that will be an incredible video recording, when it comes time for that. So yeah, but that won't be for a while, but just to let you know, we are trying to make that happen for you guys, and I'm really excited about that. So, but anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you again, everybody. God bless you, and look forward again to the next episode on Songs of the Great Lakes.